All right, we can go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to PeopleSoft Upgrade Accelerator Tools demo, tackling customizations for rapid upgrades. A few quick reminders before we get started with today's webinar. Attendees have been placed on mute for the duration of the presentation. If you have questions, please submit them in the chat to panelists or in the Q&A portal, and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. We'll have a few poll questions throughout this webinar today. Please participate in those as they allow us to cater the presentation to the crowd that we have with us today. This webinar will be recorded and sent out to attendees via email no later than next week. And with that, I will turn things over to Jeff.
Thanks, Maddie. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jeff Hilliard. I'm a partner with Elire. I lead our on-premise Center of Excellence, which includes PeopleSoft. I have 25 plus years of PeopleSoft technical and upgrade expertise, as well as completing over 15 PeopleSoft 9.2 upgrades. With me, I have Ryan Martini, who is our PeopleSoft practice lead. I'll let him introduce himself.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for joining today. So as Jeff mentioned, I'm Ryan Martini. I'm the PeopleSoft practice lead. I've joined Elire with over 20 years of PeopleSoft and business consulting experience. Personally, I've done over 20 different implementations, upgrades, assessments, both HCM and finance. So looking forward to the conversation today.
Thanks, Ryan. A little bit about Elire. We were founded in 2005. We have over 300 clients, of which 40 of those being Fortune 500 clients. We've successfully completed over 250 PeopleSoft projects over the life of the company. We started with PeopleSoft, so we've been doing PeopleSoft since our inception. We have also most recently completed 30 cloud projects as well. So our cloud practice is continuing to thrive and grow along with our PeopleSoft practice. As I mentioned, I've completed over 15 PeopleSoft 9.2 upgrades. That number continues to grow as well. We still have a few projects in flight that we're hoping to complete early next year. Our consultants, on average, have 20 plus years of PeopleSoft expertise, so we think we're the most knowledgeable in the industry. We follow a very formalized methodology as part of our PeopleSoft practice, which we call the Success Delivered. It allows you to move forward with whatever your initiative is in PeopleSoft, whether it's an upgrade, optimization, even implementations that are still happening, moving forward with confidence with the scope that you have identified. What the main point of today's webinar is to talk about our accelerator tools that go along with the methodology, mainly the customization identification tool, as well as our scope object tracker tool, which again, it really helps you guide your project effort from completion, from the inception through completion, delivering your project on time, on budget. At Elire, we have a fully integrated, cost-effective nearshore and offshore model. Many of our nearshore developers have many years experience under Elire projects, and of course, that allows your budgets to to come in well under what we're intending there, as well as having success as it relates to your development. Deep understanding and expertise. As I mentioned, we have a lot of our consultants have a lot of years of experience. So they've become experts in common PeopleSoft pain points and roadblocks. So as we've helped customers get to 9.2, we've been able to steer those things off early in the project efforts, and continue to do so as we help customers migrate to the cloud. This is just a quick NASCAR slide of some of our customers. As you can see, if you can browse through, we've covered many industries, including financial services, utilities, higher ed, state and local, federal, with an emphasis on Department of Energy, healthcare, retail, just to name a few. So we've done a lot of work in PeopleSoft across many of the industries, if not all industries. Our PeopleSoft services cross over many PeopleSoft initiatives, including upgrades, implementations. As I mentioned, we actually are kicking off an implementation later this afternoon, believe it or not. So it's good news that PeopleSoft is well and thriving. PeopleSoft optimizations, which is a key thing for clients as they continue to move forward in their PeopleSoft investment, whether it's moving to the cloud or, if they're choosing to stay on PeopleSoft, optimizing to the best of their ability, using our tools to help them do so. PeopleSoft continuous delivery, which is referred to as CDM. This is all about using our tool set, our methodology to stay current with PUM. So we encourage customers to do that, as well as take on new features as it makes sense for your organization as you work through those PUM efforts. We do a lot of PeopleSoft test framework. We have Valentin Totoro, who probably many of you, if you've engaged in PeopleSoft, the PTF tool, he's done many webinars, and he was actually one of the Oracle folks that actually developed the tool itself. So we do a lot of PeopleSoft test framework. We do, over the last few years, we've done a ton of PeopleSoft lease admin and asset management implementations due to the new FASB rules. We were founded, when a lot of our founding partners are treasury consultants or past treasury consultants that worked in PeopleSoft. So we continue to do a lot of PeopleSoft treasury work, as well as helping customers migrate from PeopleSoft to Oracle Cloud. So that's been obviously a newer initiative that many customers are undertaking. And then we also have a managed services area, practice area that does a lot of support for PeopleSoft customers, for many other customers on other platforms, helping customers keep their PeopleSoft production system up and running, as well as helping with any PUM updates and patching and things like that. From an agenda standpoint, we're going to start off with a problem statement and why you're here. We'll talk about some of the PeopleSoft assessment strategies. So, where it makes sense to actually begin to think about tackling your PeopleSoft transformation. We'll do an overview of our assessment methodology. So this is just a sneak peek at our overall methodology, but it's obviously a core component to getting your transformation started. It's about understanding your current state and understanding your customizations and how to move forward. We'll jump into our Accelerator tools, which the first being the customization identification tool. So it's intended to help customers understand where their customizations lie within the application, as opposed to looking at things at an object level basis, like using the delivered compare reports. We'll talk a little bit about our current state review and disconnect analysis process, and that allows our consultants to get up to speed and how the application is configured and being used today, and it allows us to kind of set the foundation for future state recommendations. Evaluating and managing project scope. So once we've identified the scope, and we'll talk about the different areas of scope as we work through this, but how do we manage that scope once we get the approval to move forward with the actual implementation project? And then we'll have time for some questions and wrap up. With that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Thanks, Jeff. So as Jeff mentioned, we have a host of service offerings. Our core tenet of the background of all of our partners and what really was the foundation for Elire was PeopleSoft at its core. As Jeff mentioned, we've got 20 years of experience as almost an expectation in my practice and Jeff's practice as well. And so with that in mind, we kind of set the framework that we meet clients where they are. And our first step in really helping guide them, whether they're actually considering an upgrade, as Jeff mentioned, we're taking on a new implementation as of this afternoon, or just looking to get current. And so understanding where a client is and what the goal is our initiative as a first step. And that can be a few different areas. If we think about how do we get our house clean in terms of a move of house or just an upgrade in general, it's typically focused around making sure we can reduce customizations to take advantage of new functions, features that we now can look at via the PUMs. We've got a 10-year plus Oracle type support roadmap now that gives us the ability to know that the product itself is going to be improved over time, but also we've got support behind that. And so how do we take advantage of those new capabilities and also look at areas where maybe we did something in the past as an organization to customize or enhance PeopleSoft where a function didn't exist. And so most of our clients have a kind of a varied set of backgrounds internally, but many of them have been on PeopleSoft for well over 5+ years, some of them 10 to 20. And so as you can imagine, there's a host of baked in inherent knowledge customizations in a solution, but there's not always great information about what's in the solution. And so our ability to do a a very holistic view for our clients on what's in the PeopleSoft environment and where does it exist, and drive that conversation. Really focuses on the vast number of potential enhancements. And our tool sets allow us to pull out all of the customizations across every single module, across pillars, and see where we can align and say, can this now be replaced with delivered functionality that exists, new functionality that's coming out within a PUM. As we know, if you've been on PeopleSoft and worked with PeopleSoft for long enough, you used to remember the stacks of paper we'd go through as compare reports that went online. And so this is a challenging thing to go through. Obviously, a compare report, it doesn't give you the visibility you need to align to a business process or a grouped module area. And so, how are customizations grouped together? Is there any real good documentation around that? Typically, our clients have very limited documentation around what's what. There may be a few different resources as to a knowledge base internally that understand what's in a system or what were the drivers from a business perspective that led to an enhancement or customization, but very poor documentation typically. And so we look at some of the areas that could be problem statements as to why you're here today. And these are all areas that we typically hear right out of the gate. Show me the number and types of customizations. We just don't know what's in our system today. And then, of course, as Jeff mentioned, our tools allow us to not just give you that visibility, but also help manage scope across the project initiative right out of the gate, from the assessment of what's in the PeopleSoft environment all the way through project completion. I think we've got a poll question here. Maddie?
Yes. So you should see the first poll question pop up on your screen. What roadblocks does your organization currently have with staying current with PeopleSoft? So that's select all that apply, please. Looks like we've got about 40% participation on that, so we'll give people another minute or two. All right, get your answers in, and then I can end the poll and share the results. So it looks like the vast number of PeopleSoft enhancements, whether or not customizations can be replaced with delivered functionality, and lack of documentation look like our top 3 results.
Yeah, and that's right in line with the conversations we hear right out of the gate with our teams and those on site engaged with our clients is helping drive visibility to those areas. And so, Jeff, if you want to go to the next slide on your end. And thank you for the feedback, by the way. It helps kind of also drive areas where we can help facilitate conversations with you. So from an assessment standpoint, there are typically a few different ways that we're engaging with our clients. We've got existing clients we assist on either upgrades, tools, general upgrades in the past, getting current efforts. But if we take on new initiatives, most clients are on 9.2 at this point, and in some various level of a PUM. They may be on an outdated PUM. They may have customizations built in, but there are still traditional PeopleSoft upgrades, both on finance, HCM, and general across pillars. As Jeff mentioned, we're actually taking on a new implementation, which will allow us to have the flexibility of putting in everything as a fresh start. But if we're taking on more traditionally the PeopleSoft upgrade on the tools or on the functional side, those are always the kind of existing larger initiatives. Obviously, getting current on PUMs is a big request, and reducing customization. So as you get current on your PUMs, that gives us the opportunity to tell you, here's what we're seeing in the environment, align it to your different module areas, get a real good driver to the business conversations as to what that need was for customization or enhancement, and then also determine how we can pull some of those things out. So getting current on PUM is not for us just getting you up to a current release. It's also a way for you to really streamline everything within the solution. So it helps promote that continuous delivery and improvement. So if you do get to a cleaner place, if you will, and getting current on PUM, then you can get into a good cadence of taking on new functions, new features that are going to come out and have come out consistently now from Oracle and will continue to do so. So it also allows for flexibility and scoping. So there's not an unknown around, what you've got coming up in the past, where we've had clients that may be well out of date on releases, or in this case, PUMs. You've got some capacity issues. You may not be able to take on new initiatives that your business really needs to look at, and you can't do that because of where you are from a release standpoint. We've also got clients that we help more of a tactical nature, and so more of a focused optimization approach, where they may want to identify from a business perspective, really highlighting, in this case, an example would be procure to pay, and they really want to focus on what that looks like and how they can improve that and move from a classic to a fluid, or just remove customizations. But we can also tailor the approach of leveraging our assessment as well as our tool set to a specific module area. As Jeff mentioned, we do have clients that will make a move either holistically or tactically to a cloud initiative. And so we're well positioned to help you get there by taking you through these steps along the way. Essentially cleaning house, looking at your business processes, looking at your impacts, both from a business perspective, people perspective, and then ultimately a system perspective. So whether you look at something in the relative near term as an upgrade, or a major shift as a module, or in a complete pillar shift, it helps you be in position to take that on and also understand what your business drivers are in any solution. Thanks, Jeff. So as we touched on, there's a kind of an initial execution of our customization identification tool. And that, again, gives us a real strong visibility across either your entire pillar, multiple pillars, into what's in your solution across modules. And we then can group those into identification tools that allow us to drive the business conversations with you to say, what's the need here? Is it still needed? Can we look at delivered functionality? Can we reduce the footprint, if you will, of what that looks like within your system? Obviously, there's a current state process part of that, which Jeff will touch on a bit here shortly. But from the overall assessment methodology and just general tool set, we align the initial groupings with your business and your module to look at where you're really getting value out of your existing customizations. If we can't reduce the overall customization, can we look at something that's more current and look at things to drop zones, make it where it's a much lighter footprint for you, so you could take advantage of new PUMs, new features as they come out without a major impact from a technical perspective. Obviously, there's a review of the current state and the disconnect. We take that right into more of an analysis workshop where we kind of facilitate that conversation, and we do help weigh. We'll give our feedback as to where you may find value from new functions, new features, and help assign a priority to your customizations in line with new functions and features that you may want to take a peek at it, but also take on and remove these customizations. And ultimately, then your final recommendation list is, again, either tactical in nature and looking at a specific module, or holistically across a pillar as you make a major shift to an upgrade or getting current on PUM, and understanding what's in your solution, whether it could be a business process, but also part of the solution is taking out the customizations and identifying where those exist and where we can reduce those across the board.
All right, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it, and we'll jump into the tool here shortly. That where we set those priorities, those cost benefits, those decisions that are important to making a decision regarding your scope. All that will be captured in the scope object tracker tool that we'll jump into, as well as the setting the actual project scope as it relates to estimated hours and effort. I believe that we have a second poll question.
Yes, I'm launching the second poll question now. You should see it up on your screen. What level of understanding does your organization have of current customizations? We have very little visibility into our current customizations, have a general idea of our customizations, but are lacking documentation, have current state referenceable documentation, but lacking internal resource knowledge, have current state referenceable documentation and internal resource knowledge, or not sure where we stand regarding current customizations. So we have about 50% participation in this right now. We'll give people another few moments or so. All right. And the poll here and share the results. Looks like most have a general idea of our customizations, but are lacking documentation. 52% of respondents there.
All right. Thanks, Maddie. Appreciate it. All right, so jumping into our first accelerator tool, which is our customization identification tool. So we developed a proprietary process that groups the customized online objects into customization buckets organized by the associated PeopleSoft component. As Ryan alluded to, a lot of customers are dependent on running their delivered compare report, which is very much segregated by the object types. So it really doesn't give you a clear picture of how these customizations are grouped together, and specifically how they're grouped together within a business process. So the grouping reveals a much cleaner, comprehensive view of all the online customizations. The process facilitates a more efficient method for analyzing your customized objects. So again, having those listed actually under the business process or component that they belong to. Customized objects not reported on the output, which is a BI publisher report. We consider those offline customizations, things like application packages, component interfaces, queries, security, those type of things. We still capture those because we have that visibility through the delivered compare report, and we pull those objects and group those objects so that they're easily consumable in the scope tracker tool as well. So everything gets accounted for within the results of the actual process. Just a high-level overview of the proprietary process. It all starts with the delivered compare report. So we do run the PeopleSoft delivered compare. If we're doing a full optimization of your PeopleSoft, it would be a full database compare. So your existing copy of production versus as your source, and then your target or vice versa, being your current state demo PUM image, so that we're comparing apples to apples. So we'll take the process then is an application engine that reads the results of the PS project item created from that process. So we know what objects were actually customized by the customer. The application engine groups the objects into the components, and then it calls a BI publisher report, which then organizes the output of the customizations. This is just a example of what the compare report output looks like. The BI publisher itself, it comes out in an Excel spreadsheet, and it starts with, it gives us our module, our menu, the component that the customization was associated with, and then the navigation to that component, the application navigation. The only objects, the customized objects shown below, are those that came that are showing as being customized by the customer. So in this case, this is a bolt-on component that was created by a customer. So for the most part, everything within the component is going to be a bolt-on unless delivered fields or records were used. So we're only reporting out what was customized, and then the bottom one here is an example of a delivered component that was customized, and this happens to be the voucher entry component. And again, we revealed the what was customized by the customer. And again, this doesn't tell us the why yet. We'll capture that once we get into the scope object tracker tool. But this gives you an idea from an object different, and you can see the different object types within these components that were changed. If you're looking at a compare report, you're not going to see how these things are all interrelated, whereas this report will show you within that component what was customized. So that's the sample output. We will I will show this top example, which is it's a custom payment request application that a customer built. I'll show you it within the scope object tracker tool how we captured this from the output of this report, and then how it gets tracked and how decisions are made against that customization once we get into the scope tracker tool. And then, as Ryan mentioned, of course, knowing the total count of your customizations. Most customers prefer that, to know that across their different modules, so that we have an understanding of kind of where our opportunities lie within the application. In this case, it looks like a lot of project costing modules here, purchasing. So those are the areas that we'd have some opportunity. We like to look at things that were customized from a delivered perspective versus a bolt-on. Obviously, just the maintenance associated with those two are quite different. So it's good to understand how much bolt-on work has been done by a customer versus their online customizations. Bolt-on obviously being the preferable as it relates to continuing to stay current with your application. And then, of course, we have some summaries by the offline programs as well. So at the end of the day, we have a full count of all customizations that were captured from the initial compare report. All right. So that's the customization identification, and we'll talk about how that feeds into the actual assessment methodology, as well as the scope object tracker tool. I did want to cover quickly how we quickly get current state understanding of your current state. If we're coming in and Elire has not been part of your organization in the past, we like to follow a process that's called SIPOC mapping, which is it's a pretty standard mapping process that many organizations use. A SIPOC map is a high-level process map used to identify all relevant elements of a business process. So in the example, the customization I showed just previously is a payment request. So that payment request customization probably falls in a non-PO voucher entry process. So what we would do is have a quick, typically they're 1-hour sessions for that, for the various business processes, where we identify the suppliers, the inputs, the outputs, and the customer. So in the case of this payment request customization, the supplier could be the online entry, using the voucher entry pages. The inputs could be an invoice from a customer. The outputs could typically would result in an AP voucher that gets created. And the customer would then be the treasury department or the financial gateway, which then sends that payment, to the supplier. And then a lot of what we're trying to capture is the actual process that's followed. So now that we understand kind of what starts the process and what's involved with it, what is the actual process? And this is where we'll spend more more time to understand the different attributes within a process, and attributes. Again, are background pieces of information that support the overall process. And those could be customizations, they could be delivered reports, they can be workflows, things like that. The process attributes are usually assigned with a specific process step, and multiple process attributes can be assigned to a single step. So this, as we're working through a review of a business process, we want to start to understand in the context of the process where some of your enhancements are, where your reports lie. What is this process have a specific system interface to a third-party system? Are there audit points associated with this process? Is there specific workflow that's involved with the process itself? So starting to understand those, we try to document those as part of that 1-hour session for the business process, which then we start piecing together from the output from the customization report. We're able to start seeing where these customizations sit within the actual application in regards to the business process. And then one of the key items as it relates to the SIPOC mapping is really trying to understand disconnects. So what a disconnect is anything that impedes the effectiveness or efficiency of a process. So from an effectiveness standpoint, is the process producing the desired result with consistent quality? From an efficiency standpoint, is the process producing desired result with as few resources, meaning time, money, or people as possible? And Elire will work to identify which disconnects can be resolved via the technology. So are there things within the application that we can suggest that would resolve this disconnect, or other targeted improvements such as org changes, policy redesign? And it could just be that there's a lack of skills or training amongst the folks that are actually performing the actual process itself. So disconnect categories can fall in these 3 major buckets. And again, we want to capture these and really hone in on these as the disconnects will become a source of requirements of the future state design. So with that, I think we have a poll question number 3.
Yep, you'll see the third and final poll question of today's presentation pop up on your screen. In your opinion, what types of disconnects currently affect your organization? So you can select all that apply. Looks like we've got about 40% participation, so we'll give about another 20 or 30 seconds left in this. All right, get your final answers in, and then I can end the poll here and share the results. Looks like about 63% say process flow at the process level, 50% roles, responsibilities, job performer level, and then skills also at the job performer level.
Okay, great. We appreciate the engagement with that. All right. So now that we understand the customizations, or at least the what has been customized, we understand a little bit more about your current state and some of the disconnects or pain points that you're currently having. It's time to then start to pull all this stuff together. And with that, I'll turn it over to Ryan.
Sure. As we started this conversation, it was really about us kind of relaying not just our tools and approach, but also how we meet clients where they are. And so as Jeff has laid out quite nicely, there are different ways we get there. Part of that's our customization analysis and helping you understand what's in PeopleSoft today. And that can be online customizations. It can be grouped by component and generally module area business drivers. There could be the offline pieces of existing delivered code that you've modified over time, app engines, app packages, integration brokers, but also just existing things that are ancillary, such as triggers or supplemental tools that we have to take into consideration for overall scope. Jeff just touched on what that looks like to help tie that together from a process standpoint, and then also identify where that process could have a disconnect, whether it's an organizational disconnect, a true process level, maybe tied to the job and the performer itself. There are different ways that it can all impact the overall scope of taking on either getting current or getting upgraded or going to a new solution. That's all something we factor into the overall total scope. Obviously, most of the drivers are also to take on new functions and features. And thankfully, we've got a roadmap, not just for support, but also continuous improvement from Oracle that allows us to look at these things and say, what are new features coming out that our business teams are asking for that we can align with and actually promote and drive change on internally. And then obviously they're existing, I'll say, along with not knowing what's in a solution such as PeopleSoft, we've got clients that also maybe have a multi-year backlog of work and initiatives that the business team members, or even technology-wise, the technology teams have been asking for and looking to get current on. And all of those components that you see there, all those 4 different areas, make up what we factor into your total scope as we move forward with out of our initial phase of the assessment and move forward in another capacity for you. So as we look at the whole tool set of the Accelerator tools that we offer at Elire, we touched on the customization identification portion, and we'll talk about, I know Jeff will talk about the scoping side of that as a demo. That also drives all of our requirements that are pulled from our initial assessment and really helps us drive not just the overall scope and level of effort as to what you've got in your system, but also we leverage this for upgrades, implementations, both on technology side, on the functional side, and it helps us drive all the requirements down to the time level it takes per resource assigned to each different module, function, scope, discrete scope item that we track. Jeff will touch on the overall visibility that we give. It's a great tool for us to help manage projects, but also to give visibility to our clients as to where things stand, both at a macro and a micro level. It includes things such as your standard RAID logs, and then overall, as I mentioned, effort tracking that we can get down into the detail level. So each different scope object, and whether it be one of those 4 components, is something we consider a discrete scope item that can be assessed and put into a category and then assigned appropriately. And really then that drives our projects. So that's really the next step for us. It's not just taking a here's a holistic, here's what you got, understanding your pain points, but really driving towards how do you move forward from there. So we use this across, as I mentioned, various different initiatives. We just did this on a new implementation that we're now moving into that phase on, but typically it's around upgrades, PUM updates, optimizations, areas where you may want to prepare yourself as an organization to take a shift, either dip your toe in the pool or make a holistic shift to move to the cloud. And so this helps us facilitate what would be considered in scope. What can we drop? How do we assess that against either a delivered function or another function in a different tool? All that's captured within our scope object tracker. And so we continue, much like Oracle continues to improve their offering, we continue to improve the scope object tracking tools as well as the holistic set of the Accelerator tools in line with our customer requirements. Part of that output that we look at also that really falls in line with much of your expected methodology that most of us are used to in managing projects is pulling out the general buckets across the ISW, right? Reports, interfaces, where we want to configure features. We've got existing enhancements to look at, either bolt-on or customizations or just generally workflow. And those categories align nicely, but it gives you a very good picture as to typically per module where you're putting most of your existing investment or where you have historically, and then also where we want to consider maybe taking some of those items out, going to delivered, shifting to something that's a lighter footprint. But again, giving you that 50,000 foot view down to then the 10,000 and 5,000 foot view as needed for the organization. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and show the goods and allow Jeff to jump into the tool and showcase a portion of our scope.
Yep, give me 1 minute while I get logged in here.
Sure.
We're going directly into PeopleSoft. And let's do this quick. All right. All right, let me share here. All right, let me know, Ryan, once you can see my screen.
I do. Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so I'm logged into one of our demo PeopleSoft environments, which has our scope object tracker tool installed. I have some sample data from some prior clientele, some stuff that we've staged up so for demonstrations. As you can see, we built the tool within the Fluid homepage network framework, I should say. So we used Fluid tiles and kind of to help things from a navigational perspective, so we can quickly get to some of our dashboards. We can get within the application. We can get into our configuration rather quickly, just like any other Fluid homepage allows you to do. We'll jump into a couple of these other dashboards later, but I did want to show this one that happens to have a pivot grid, which is our recommended action. So as we work through our scoping and start making decisions of future state, we can, at real time, essentially come in as we're making decisions on multiple scope items. And, there could, depending on how many customizations and new features we're evaluating. In this scenario, we can see here that, based on our recommendations, we're retaining about 63% of our customizations in this case, but we're also removing about 21%, where 11% of these are being replaced, 10% are being removed. Over on the left here, you can see by module, we can take a look at the number of scope items that were part of the scope that we were evaluated, and we could drill into each module separately. So if we wanted to see how AP did with their future state recommendations, you can see they did a little better job, I should say, as far as removing customizations, where they're only retaining 50% of their customizations, And in this case, they're removing about 31%, 16% of those being replacements, hopefully for new feature functionality. So as we work through, this is kind of the final, as we make decisions across all the different scope items. This is one of the dashboards that we use to really see how decisions are being made across the different modules. Some organizations, I'm sure, have areas that just don't seem to want to play along. So we'll quickly have visibility as we're making decisions, feature state decisions, who's really not taking the time to really reevaluate their customizations and seeing if they can be replaced and or removed because they're not adding value. This is one of the real-time dashboards that we can use. I did want to jump in to the more the detailed as we work through different scope items. In this case, we're going to take a look at that payment request customization that we saw pop up on the output report. I will say most of this information, a lot of this information gets defaulted from a component interface that since we have the customization identification tool built in PeopleSoft, we have all the data that gets generated as part of the output from that tool. So obviously, if it's in a PeopleSoft table, we can leverage it. So we leverage an application engine that calls a CI that essentially takes the results from that customization identification output and we'll load it through the CI directly into the scope object tracker. In this case, we have this item was labeled 1020, and again, typically we'll start with 1,000. Some customers prefer to number their items differently, and then it's just the next number. So as we're loading different customizations, the number increments by 1 through the component interface load. So if you remember, the output all started with the menu component navigation. So all that got loaded again from the output of the tool. The data source itself got defaulted in from the online customization identification. The module came across from the output. As it relates to the business process, so we can get more granular. So within a module, you may want to say you may want to segregate different processes within that module. In this case, for AP, they're calling out suppliers separately, Vertex, things that have that 1099s. Things that the organization was more, concerned with or wanted more visibility into at the business process level. And again, we can either assign this once the data is loaded initially, or we can assign it within the output of the customization tool that will then get loaded directly here. So we're not entering much of this information directly. The scope type, of course, we know from our output that whether it's an enhancement bolt-on or customization. We showed the difference of those two on the output example. The Rice W, a lot of times we won't know this initially, so that this is one of the data elements that we may have to derive once we get into the working sessions. And then I'll circle back to the recommended action, because that's what we had just taken a peek at of what your future state actions are going to be. We'll take a look at that in just a second. We'll kind of talk through what those recommended actions represent. But some of the other key data elements that will have to be determined as we're working through the facilitated working sessions is what's the priority of this particular customization, or if it's a new feature, what's the priority, what's the complexity. If we go to the next tab, what's the impact of this customization to other systems? What's the impact to people? So if this is a new feature, that we're considering here, what would be the impact of implementing that new feature? And that helps us determine what change management or training might be necessary. And then one of the last key data elements is the risk. So what is whatever we're recommended to do with this customization, what is the risk to the project? Will it have an impact on any possible project milestones? What's the risk at post go live? So is this such a big change that it may propose a large risk to the organization of the users not being ready for it? There could be a large magnitude of change that needs to be accounted for. So we want to capture all these items, these key data elements. And again, we do this typically in working sessions with the customer. We'll pull the tool up, just explain what the customization is all about. we'll start making comments into, as we start learning more about the customization. A lot of this, we do send out pre-work so that customers, when they come to these sessions, have an idea of what we're planning to discuss, what customizations we're looking to get more information on. As we're working through, again, this is directly within PeopleSoft. It's supposed to be a collaborative tool, so we can continually make comments and updates to this tool based on the information that was defaulted in. Once we have these key data elements, which again, priority, the complexity, the impacts, the risks, and we're comfortable with making a decision, we jump into this recommended action, which is we call our 7 R's, which consist of a redesign. So this is where, in this case, if it was a redesign, it's a customization that still needs to exist. However, it needs completely redone from design to build to execution to roll out. So this would have some, basically starting from scratch. A re-engineer is where we are taking the technical solution and making it, more efficient. And a good example of doing this is moving custom people code customizations from delivered records, delivered component pages, and things like that into event mapping, or taking a field change from changing the delivered field to a page field configurator that's using drop zones. Those type of things are all re-engineer types because they don't impact the end user. It's all a technical exercise of minimizing the customization impact. We have remove. So this is basically, this customization doesn't provide value anymore, business value. Let's just remove it. Replace. This is what we're seeing more and more of as Oracle comes out with new features and functions. We're able to remove customizations, which we're calling a replace. And the reason we distinguish between the remove and replace is the replace still has some level of effort to remove that customization, whether it's a bolt-on or a customization. We need a developer to essentially go in and remove it. And in this case, this is what this scope item represented, was a replace, because there's delivered functionality, the new payment request fluid functionality that comes in 9.2. And then, so that's the replace. A request is essentially the new features, the CFO items that Ryan mentioned. These are things that the client would be interested in, so we would have these as requests. If they are determined that the customer is not interested, we move those to reject. And then our last and not least is the retain. This is where we say, yeah, this customization adds the value. There's no better way to do it. There's no good re-engineer. Let's just retain the customization as is. And again, that would have, if you're doing a PUM update, that would still have some effort associated with reapplying that, doing your retrofit to reapply that customization. So in this case, again, we were talking, the customer wanted to replace this customization with the new delivered functionality. So I'll quickly pull up this scope item. We're able to reference what it's being replaced with. So I'm able to pull up 9346, the scope item, quickly, and we can kind of take a look at what a new feature looks like. Again, the source is different because it's coming from the CFO tool. This is the description that gets loaded through a CI directly from the CFO tool, explaining what the new feature is. And then again, the project team can make recommendations and document those recommendations directly within the tool. So that's what this is what the request would look like. Each scope item then, has an associated effort, an effort associated with it. And that's why we repeat these key data elements at the top of this cost benefit page, because it's really the complexity, the scope type, and the recommended action, in this case, a request, that are going to help us determine what the effort of implementing this new feature would be. And we have configuration within the tool. There's like 300 and some rows of the different combinations of these 3 data elements that help provide default estimates for these from a development standpoint. So in this case, it's 8 hours of development for a new feature and a new request. And we also break up the functional components. And the reason in this case, we actually you can override the development hours. In this case, it was because there were some unique workflow requirements, so we doubled the development hours. And then from a functional standpoint, we default the hours into 3 separate buckets. We have the design hours, the configuration, and the functional unit tests associated with this particular new feature function. We also have areas where we can, provide even more detailed information around the scope item, if it's an interface, if it's a report. The cost that we just evaluated gets carried over into this sign off in hours, where we can take a look at assigning these activities to different resources. And I'll do an example of that quickly. Once we start the work, if the estimated hours don't align with the baseline, we can override those, and all the dashboards then would get updated with those updated estimated hours. So I did want to just take a quick minute and show how making certain decisions within some of these scope items then get reflected within the dashboard. And this was a real life example. The payment request that we originally looked at, the customer actually, they wanted to replace the item, but as part of the upgrade, they decided it was too much work or too much change for their end users, so they wanted to defer that replacement. So what they ended up doing was changing this scope item to a retain, which is fine. So we had to reapply the bolt-on customization. And what we did here, because they still wanted to do that replacement in the future, they basically copied the scope item. So we can do a copy. So we have all this information gets carried forward, and they copied it into an item called 1020C, which this would be where the actual replacement would occur in some future phase. So I had already saved that copy, so we can pull up quickly the 1020C item here real quick. And this again is just a copy of that initial scope item, and this is the payment request, and this is where we're going to actually do the replacement in this case. And it's already linked to the new scope item. I'm going to go ahead and we're going to do this as part of a future phase. So I'm going to make this a phase 3 item. So again, phase 1 was the upgrade. We're choosing to do this in a future phase 3. I'm going to save this, and I'm also going to move the new feature itself that we looked at, the delivered payment request, move that to the future phase as well, or to the phase 3. Sorry about that. Let's scroll down, phase 3. And we're starting to build some scope now for this new phase. So I want to go quickly into some dashboards, because you'll be able to see there was nothing previously in this phase 3 effort. So we can kind of see how these dashboards get updated just by moving those 2 scope items into a future phase 3 effort. So if I come in and look at the module dashboard, we're able to select which phase we're interested in seeing. In this case, you can see the 2 items that I just moved into phase 3. They're both the accounts payable. One was the replacement, and one was the new feature. You can see that the one is the replace, one is the request. You can get an idea as we work through, and we'll show you a full-blown dashboard as well. But you can start seeing by modules. All your modules will be listed out here below. You can see where the retains are falling. What is your keep percentage? How many are you removing? What's the removal percentage? You're able to see that as you're working through whatever effort, whatever phase you happen to be working through. And it goes all the way across the key data elements. You can see the complexities, the impacts, all that gets recorded here by module. So you have a holistic view, a summary level view of what decisions are being made. And then here's your holistic review view of by module, the effort that was associated with it. I know we didn't look at that very quickly, but essentially there were 46 functional hours and there were 17.5 development hours. So I do want to quickly go back into these items and make some resource assignments. So now before I do that, I want to assign some resources to this effort, this phase 3 effort that we just carved out. So we have the capability of assigning project resources within the tool. It's called the resource tracker, and we can go in and oops, I don't think I want to go to the other. I want to go to the resource capacity first, and we want to look at the phase 3. The official phase is phase 3. I had assigned those items to integration test cycle 1, and I assigned some resources here that are available to help participate on this phase 3 effort. So they're going to help with the replacement of the payment request and the implementation of the new payment request fluid functionality, delivered functionality. Our technical developer, Veronica, here is available to work 10 days, but only available to work 2 hours a day. Tim Cool, our functional lead, is available for the same period of time, but only 5 hours a day. And then Jen Simon, another functional resource, is available for the 10 days as well, all starting yesterday, going through 12/16. And then you can kind of see, here's their total capacity, right? It's just simple math, 10 times 2 is 20. So they're available to help support over 10 days, 20 hours of their effort. So we set this up, and then as we go back into the scope tracker and start assigning the work to these two folks, we can start seeing how allocated or the capacity that's getting assigned to the various resources. So I'm going to pull up, here's the replacement. I'm going to go to the sign off in hours, and I'm going to start assigning resources to this. In this case, I want the functional owner to be Tim Cole. I want our developer to be Veronica Piney-Rowe. Those were two resources that we set up as being available to help support this effort. As we selected these, you can see that their IDs started to default in the rows below, so that we can track the individual design efforts, the individual configuration, the individual functional test, and the development. The developer that we selected above is the ID that you see here. The other three lines all relate to the functional owner. And then we can start tracking, now that we have this, we can start tracking actual completion against this item at these task row, at the task level. So the designs and development and configuration, all that we'll start tracking the actual completion against. I'm going to save this real quick and do one last thing. I'm going to assign the new feature that we're going to implement, which is 9346. This is the new fluid item that we're going to implement. So this is the new fluid payment request. I'm going to assign the same resources. So our functional owner, and I'll slow down so you can kind of see, as I select Tim Cole, his ID gets associated with the functional rows, and I'll select Veronica Piney-Rowe to do the technical. There's her ID here. So now we're all set. I'm going to save this. Now I want to go look to see how we're doing from a capacity standpoint. Did I over assign work to these resources? And we could do that in the resource tracker. And again, it's all with the phase and the test cycle. So within a phase, you can have multiple test cycles. Obviously, you have SIT, UAT, whatever it happens to be. We'll get that configured. And in this case, you can see, based on the capacity that we initially assigned and the fact that we started yesterday. So because one day elapsed, now Veronica, she had 20, if you remember, 10 times 2, and now she only has 18 remaining. But that's okay, because she only has 17 and a half hours assigned to her, so we're in good shape there. On the flip side, Tim only has 45 hours left because of the 5 hours that elapsed because of starting yesterday, but he has 46 hours left of work assigned to him. So we can quickly go in and just reallocate this some of the effort at the line level. I'm going to go back into 1020C and quickly show us taking the functional unit test, which is 1 hour. That's all we needed to get reallocated. I'm just going to go ahead and assign that to Jen Simon. She was our third resource on this project, which then corrects the over allocation issue that we had for Tim. So as we start to do work on these items, again, we can come in and start putting our % complete. So if I'm logged in as Tim, and I want to say that we're 100% complete with our design and 50% with our configuration. And if I were logged in as Veronica, and I wanted to say we're 25% done with development, again, we can also track the actual hours, so we can have our burn versus our estimates, all that good stuff, all available through queries, and as well as assigning the dates. So in this case, I assigned the start date, end date. As opposed to keeping all this detail in a smart sheet or a Microsoft project plan, we can keep all this detail in the tool itself. I'm going to go ahead and just save this and then show you quickly the resulting effort dashboard. So as we start the project, we can real time go into an effort dashboard, assuming folks are, updating their scope items correctly. And a lot of times we say by Friday or Thursday by noon, have your scope items updated. We can come in and see how we're tracking against completion of these items. And again, we have our 2 items here in accounts payable. We had our estimate was 20 hours and 20 and a half hours for design. We've completed 2.4%, and we have 20 hours remaining of the design in this case. And then same thing for the configuration. So we can start to see how things are progressing, and we can see what's left. So we can see here our configuration hours remaining, what our design hours remaining are, those type of things, all tracked within the actual effort dashboard. I just wanted to show you, I know we're running low on time, so I just wanted to show quickly what a normal dashboard would look like if it was a full project. And we'll just look at the upgrade phase of this effort. We were focused on phase 3, but if I look at phase 1, you can get an idea. Here's all the modules. Here's the various scope items that had design elements to them. We can see how things are being tracked as far as our estimates versus what's remaining. So in this case, we have 309 design hours remaining to complete, all the way across the various levels of design, configuration, functional unit test, as well as development. And then just a quick view again of the module dashboard, and then we'll close it up. And I apologize for not leaving much time for questions, but I did want to show some of these key dashboards that we use to track these things. So overall, in this case, we had an upgrade that had 1,600 customizations or new features, and you can see some of the decisions that were made holistically across the upgrade. So we were able to remove 197 customizations, equating to 12.2%. Because this was more of a lift and shift upgrade. And again, it tracks all the way across the key data elements, what decisions were made by module. So with that, and I apologize for going so quickly, I'll leave it open for, or turn it back to Maddie for questions.
Yeah, it looks like we have one quick question in the chat. Is custom event mapping, will that also be captured on this tool?
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry, what was the question, Maddie?
Well, yeah, custom event mapping, will that also be captured?
So the event mapping, yeah. So if we take a customization and re-engineer it using the event mapping, we can do one of two things. We can add it as a separate scope item manually, or one customer, what we've done is we went through the event mapping table and actually did a more holistic upload through a component interface into the scope object tracker. Typically, there's we haven't seen a huge number, so we've just been entering them manually so that they're representative, and we'll load those as configuration related items. So they're not really customizations per se, but we want to track those as configuration because they're essentially replacing a customization. Great question.
Can you use these tools to help with both an upgrade to 9.2 and also efforts to keep current on a PUM?
Absolutely, and that's essentially the feature I was trying to show is basically, we can do this. It depends on how you want to set up your different phases, right? And the example I showed, it was a 9.2 upgrade, which was phase 1, and I showed you how to move items that were deferred as part of that phase 1 into a future phase, which was we used phase 3. But what we're seeing our customers do is essentially create a new phase for the different PUM releases that they want to take a look at. And that's where they kind of start moving things in. So they'll have the new PUM features loaded from the CFO tool, and then they'll say, you know what, some of these other high priority items or customizations that we wanted to tackle or re-engineer as part of a prior phase, we have some room here on this PUM update to put those in here, so we can essentially just go into that scope item and push it into that PUM phase, so then it becomes part of that scope. If that makes sense.
Right. One other question we have coming in: can my company keep this tool even after my contract with Elire ends?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's obviously we utilize the tool to get you through your first successful project, whether again an upgrade or transformation. But the idea or our hope is that the customer continues to use the tool as they evolve in their PeopleSoft journey, and even if it's a journey to the cloud, we can use the tool to do your future PUMs, and when you're ready to actually do your cloud project, assuming your organization is moving that way, you can essentially track your cloud implementation as part of the PeopleSoft in the actual tool itself. So to answer your question, yes, it's a tool that we provide to our customers, and certainly we hope that they continue to use it for many of their initiatives going forward.
Excellent. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. As a reminder, the recording will be sent out to attendees via email and will also be available on the Elire YouTube channel. and on our website next week. We invite you to subscribe to our monthly PeopleSoft newsletter and also join us at Reconnect and Blueprint 4D May 8th through 11th in Dallas, Texas. Feel free to reach out to Jeff or Ryan with questions or our general PeopleSoft@elire.com email address. Thank you all again and have a great rest of your afternoon.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye.